Okay, so I want to take a few minutes and have some fun and look at angles and arcs coming off the hurdle. We're not going to talk about going into the hurdle. I'm going to save that for another day, but today we're going to talk about coming off the hurdle because we were talking about that yesterday. And so I want to show you, geometrically what I see and what I have seen for at least 3 years. I've been back and forth with this sort of battle within myself about what I have been told or mentally in my head sort of thought was going on in terms of going over the hurdle versus what I thought I was seeing, and on another level just what just seemed to make more sense to me intuitively. And so I'm gonna talk about that, and since we've had this since Stuart sent out that email about paradigms and things like that, it's just really got me sort of thinking, and it I guess gave me a little bit of confidence to go back to some things that I had been thinking a few years back, but just doubted myself to the point and put it down and put it to the side. But I picked it up again and started looking at it again, and it just rings more true to me than ever. And also I think I'm in a better place to sort of articulate what I think a little bit better. So here we are with a hurdle, and what we would commonly say was our desired arc, going over the hurdle. All fine and good. So I'm going to leave that alone for now. And so in terms of what I was talking about yesterday, so if I put a hurdler here, so this would be, say, Max coming off the hurdle right now. Of course, his lead foot is not going to be that far out in front of him, but for the sake of argument or for the sake of explanation, I'm going to leave it there so that we can see what happens when the leg is posted up, right? So what I'm going to show you, happens to a lesser degree, but because, angles are angles and geometry is geometry, it's happening, okay? So, from here we would think that we want his hips, to continue along this line, right? But what would happen if he actually posts up, which is kind of what he does now as his foot hits the ground, then really what's happening is something that's more like this. Let me highlight this for a second. There we go. Yeah, we're getting there. And give our pivot point here. So as he puts his foot down, so now his foot is not going to move anymore. It's on the ground. It's in a that's the pivot point at this. So everything else, if his leg is posted up, is going to rotate like this. Okay, so assuming that everything stayed the same, this is kind of what is going to be happening. And so all last year and even this year, I'm saying that he's coming off the hurdle, and then by the time his trail leg hits, he's over rotated, like he's like stumbling, falling into the ground. And the reason is because he's posted up on that leg, and so he's not going to follow that same arc here down anymore. It's going to create a new arc, which would be this, right? So now what's going to be happening as he rotates through, put that back, is his hips are going to rotate on that arc now. So we've left the arc that we originally came in on. We came in on one, foot hits the ground, the leg is posted up, and now his hips are getting thrown up in the air on a brand new arc. But he's still rotating forward and basically stumbling into the ground, right? And so what would happen here is you rotate forward, you know, and then let's say I add this guy. Let's go here. And so so we come out of having rotated through that second arc, and so we rotate it through, and so, you know, we end up kind of like this. But I guess on some level you're still falling, you're still over rotated and falling forward. So then what's happening is that your hips are over rotated, so you're falling into the ground. Whether you actually look like you're standing up or not, you know, everything is rotating forward and you're falling into the ground. So there's a lot more force that you're sort of like driving yourself into the ground. So that's where the bam comes from. Bam into the ground, and then it's like a bouncing ball. Bam over to the next step, and bam over to the next step. Okay, so again, it could be happening much less aggressively than this, but this is still what's happening. And this is why I was saying yesterday that the more efficient way to come off the hurdle is to come off more as if you were operating like that drinking bird on a pendulum, right? And so if I'm in that same position and I'm operating like a pendulum, then coming off the hurdle, my hips are following this line. So this would be the same guy, and so now I'm coming off the hurdle and I'm swinging forward, and so now I'm on my trail leg hits the ground, and then I push through and run off. So lead leg hits the ground. You know, like I said yesterday, it's sort of like my head and shoulders almost stay in the same place, and I'm sort of like, I didn't mean to do that. Let me back up. Let's get this guy. And so let's do this so I don't get too annoyed with myself. So we want things opening up like this, right? So the hips coming off the hurdle are back, and then they're like driving forward as you run through that step, right? So this is what I'm saying. That bird is kind of like drinking the water, and then it rotates forward, and then it goes and it's drinking the water, and then coming off the hurdle, you know, your lead leg lands, and then you rotate through that. You drive your hips through, but they're not driving up and over like this, right? They're not doing that. They're coming through like this. They're following a sine wave. They're following the trowel of a sound wave, right? Because at the end of the day, the running or the sprinting, our hips are oscillating along a sine wave. And as we go into the hurdle, to actually run, and this is, I don't want to get into this, but to actually do this is only effective if we're going to finish, if we're going to, number one, go into this by coming into it curved rather than trying to land and then pop up over the hurdle and then pop again, because then we just have this thing repeating itself over and over again. So we don't want this coming off the hurdle. And at the same time, let me grab that guy's second arc. Let's do this for a second. Do this, and let's grab this and copy it, and then let's paste it. Okay, here we go. Give me a second, getting there. So we don't want to go into the hurdle like that either, right? We don't want to come and bounce over the hurdle and then bounce, because that's very it's going to be jerky. It's going to be a lot more braking, and it's just not a smooth motion. It's not the most efficient way that a body is going to move forward, especially one that operates on circles, right? A sine wave is basically a circle moving linearly, right? And our body, everything rotates. So our movements should rotate, you know, into the hurdle. You know, now it's not going to be a big deep trowel, but it's not going to be just this hit and then pop up and over, right? So, but I said I wasn't going to talk about the takeoff, so let me be quiet about that. I really want to talk about the landing. And on the landing, we want to have ourselves let's put this guy back for a second. Let's put this guy back. There we go. Get rid of the second guy. And good. And so here we go. Here we go. Right. So from here, we don't want to hit and then post up over that leg. Now, if he landed here with his trail leg directly under him, and he could continue an arc that was really more up here. It's hard for me to show that, but if he landed here, then he could continue this arc without it having that upwardness, but it would still be driving him down into the ground at the end of the day, right? So in this, if he lands with his foot in front of him at all, to any degree, then this upward arc is going to happen. But if he landed with his foot here, then it would just be that the arc continues there as he runs out. But I will say again that he's basically running his hips, running his body down into the ground, you know, and having to adjust and compensate for that, which he would not have to do at all if he comes, and even if his foot did land slightly out in front of him and he was operating like a pendulum, then he's just going to run through that, right? So then if his foot lands more under him, you know, so even coming off the hurdle before his foot even lands, this starts. So then his foot lands and then you just run through it. So it's just going to be a smoother transition back onto the ground and back into running and back into what's going to be happening between the hurdles, which is, or what we would want happening, is a sine motion. It's not a up and down like a bouncing ball. It's moving in a sine. It's moving in a wave. It's moving in curves, up and down, like waves in the ocean, up and down. And that smooth transition allows for the energy within the wave to be continuous and unbroken. So it builds as you go down the track. The hurdling, the running, as long as they continue to honor this sine wave that's sort of inherent in our movements anyway, then it just continues to build. But as soon as we reverse that and we try to create an arc, you know, we're going into the hurdle, you know, let's say we came running into the hurdle like this, and then, you know, right abruptly as our foot lands, then we try to do, let's do this, take that back, let's go back one, yeah, take this, create this arc. So we came running into the hurdle, and, you know, right when our foot landed, you know, we're doing this, there you go. So now we're actually at takeoff, let's say, and we came into the hurdle and we landed, and now we're trying to do that. It's it's breaking the natural flow of what our body is kind of doing. So it becomes sort of a jumpy, breaky kind of emotion. So this is what I was saying yesterday in terms of, you know, let's try to get that feeling of being that drinking bird, and sort of like coming off the hurdle and letting things rotate through in this way, rather than trying to continue running along this pattern, right? We want to go here, we want to go down and under, coming off, okay? So hope that kind of opens that up a little bit and gives you a clearer understanding of what I'm saying and what I'm seeing, right? And I can go through a million different examples, but what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to show you that people, when they're running really fast, they're doing what I'm saying. They're doing it. So here we go. Okay, so let's look at one of my favorite hurdlers of all time, Aries Merritt. So, I mean, we both know that he has this really bouncy, you know, sort of way of running. And on the surface, you would think that it's that, you know, bouncing type arc that I was showing you in red or whatever, on the ground and then over the hurdle. But I'm not going to deal with what he's doing on the ground or take off again, but it's not that bouncy thing. He's running a sign. He's running a sign arc between the hurdles, and then most of the time, unless things get out of whack, he goes into takeoff and runs a sign over the hurdle. So coming off the hurdle right now, I'm just going to show you the drinking bird move, right? So here he is right on top of the hurdle, and then he's coming off now, and it's the hips moving forward like that pendulum, like his head is not moving. We know it is, but it's like his head is not moving and his hips are coming forward. So the pendulum is like here, and then it's going here, right? It's going here. And that's what I keep saying is what I want to see coming off the hurdles. I want to see those hips driving forward, so you're here, and then they're driving forward, and so you end up here, and that is the bottom of the sine wave. That is when he lands on his trail leg, that ends this whole thing that's doing this, right? And then he goes into the next step, boom, and on the ground again, and boom. And that's kind of what's going on. But we're only talking about how to come off the hurdle, and it's the drinking bird kind of thing. Drink the water, and then the thing falls forward. Drink the water, and then run the hips forward, okay? As opposed to, now, where Max is right now, I mean, it would just be perfectly easy for him to just do this and then run on off into the next step, right? Boom, boom, and you're off to the races. But what he's going to kind of do is basically just hold this position all the way to the ground. So, like, there's no pendulum happening. This is not happening at all, right? He's just holding that position, right? Holding it, still holding it, still holding it, still holding it, still holding it. And so the whole time he basically came, forward like this, right? He never, where he just could have just went bam and be right there. And then from there, bam, that's I'm sorry. And he could still be forward and do it. So let's say he's here and he came off the hurdle and went bam, and then the trail leg is coming through. So we just keep rotating, bam, the trail leg lands and you push through that and you're off to the races, right? That's kind of what we want. But so right now he lands here, and in this instance, then he really does continue this arc sort of all the way through to the ground, right? And then from there, like I say, it's always, then it's going to turn into that, right? But really flat because he carried that first arc too far. Now, if I go back to the one before that, and he's coming off again, he's staying in it too long. He never does the bird thing. But then on this one, he comes off, and let's get to the tool. So he comes off here, and then he posts up, which makes it do this, and then down, and then under, right? So he posts up right there. See how the leg is just totally locked? This leg right here is just totally locked, so he's just rotating over it, right? And so that kind of pushes him forward, and then he lands here, which doesn't necessarily look so bad, but that posting up is a break. And so it slows everything down. The one after this was at least better because at least he continued running through that arc. And this one, he definitely posts up, and it kind of throws his hips, from going, his hips were sort of, get the right tool, were sort of on this track, but then when he posts up, then again, it starts this second track that is interrupting the flow of the energy of his movements, which should just go like that. It should just flow through. It's a sine wave, right? It's uninterrupted, right? So that's just a visual example of what I've been saying, and so the thing that we can work on at this point if we get the runoff happening better, then the steps between are just going to be faster. They're going to just be faster because he's carrying that momentum forward instead of breaking it here and there. Again, just like Aries is doing. He's coming off, he's running the hips forward, and then that just runs him into, what comes after that, right? It just runs him into what comes after that, boom and through, okay? So that's what I was saying, and I hope that, this is useful to you, because, again, for me, I'm now speaking outside of kind of what I learned and what I was taught. And I'm just speaking in terms of what I see and what I believe that is occurring, right? And I hope that we can talk about it in more detail later, because, again, I started a process 3-4 years ago, looking at movement within sine waves and stuff like that. And again, I put it down because I thought it was sort of quackery, but I picked it up again, and I know it's not at this point. But I would welcome another opinion from someone who can, tell me I'm wrong or give me deeper insight into what I think I see, or, whatever the case may be. But anyway, that's what I got.